let's paint this beautiful red rose. This is a rose from my garden. During this video we had load shedding, so we had no power and my lights didn't work, so you'll see that it's a little bit dark certain times of the video. It's difficult green to use for a lot of paintings, but I find with a little bit of the transparent yellow it's a beautiful color. I also use French Vermilion and a different bunch of reds, but I will mention them all during the video. This is the sheen I want on my paper, so I don't want any puddles. So just make sure that when I look at my painting and I lift it up, there's a little sheen on the paper, not a lot of water. You can always just dab your brush on a piece of tissue to prevent too much water on your paper. So the paper here is wet, and if you look at the palette or the plate, the paint is not too wet. I just use the tip of my brush where I dipped it in water, and I just move the color around, just flick it around with my brush. I want a soft sheen on the paper, so if you lift the paper or you have a light like I do, you will see that it shines on the paper, so it looks like a pearl. There's not a lot of puddles at all. Picked up a bit of the Perylene Maroon, quite a thick consistency because I want to take my time to move it around myself. So I just move it towards the edge of that, close to the inside of that petal, because that's where it's going to be quite dark if you look at the reference photo. Wanted to use this Winsor red color. Now sometimes the Winsor red will dry quite chalky, and to prevent that I just drop in a drop of the Quinacridone red mixture, or I will just use it as a glaze over this Winsor red mix that I painted on this rose section now. And when I start with all of the detail, my pigment is much thicker, so that I can go in with a much darker color than what I did with my initial wash on the rose. if you are a beginner, I will tell you what the number is next to the name of the paint that I mentioned. That is normally what we call a pigment in watercolor. So sometimes the name can be the same, but the pigment will be different. If you are a beginner and you want to use the same colors that I use, always look at the pigment of your paint. You will see it will say a pigment PR209. It is that number that you see on the tube of your watercolor paints. I used my tip of my brush to create all of those little markings that you can see on the rose. Oops, and the power just went out, so I lit a few candles just to brighten up this little section so that we can see what I am painting. The sun is peeking through the blinds, however when I open the blinds the sun is so bright that I cannot see on the paper. By the time I'm finished I have a migraine because it was just so bright. But you can see what I am painting and what I am using, all the colors that I will be using. And this is the power bank that I used for the light. So it worked a little bit. There's a slight difference. I want to follow the shape of the rose, and to make sure that I create this realistic look on the petals, I use a big brush, and now I want to soften all the hard lines that I can see on the painting that I created. So I took the brush and I just flattened it between my fingers, and I used the clean water to create those markings. I didn't want to remove all of those markings by just tapping the brush over or sliding the brush all over all of those markings. So by flattening between my fingers I could create all of those little detail. I didn't want to remove it all, and that's the way that I could create those little markings that you can see on the petal there. I now go back to certain parts of the rose petals where I want to darken certain areas. I also use my eraser where the paint is completely dry now, and I just rub out most of the pencil lines that I can still see through the layers of paint that I added on. For this painting, you should use whatever you have. You should make this painting your own. You should, whenever you paint, use your own colors. Try and mix the colors as close to what you can see on the reference photo. For the full tutorial, you can go to Patreon, where it is a lot slower and a lot more in detail, and I also provide all the supplies that I use, including the line drawing for beginners to follow along. I use a very watery glaze just to darken some of these little parts of the rose. I want it to look like the sun is shining through the back of these petals, so it's very watery. I want to create those little lines that I can see again on this petal, so I picked up not too thick. I still have water on my brush so that I can at least paint this on, so it's not a thick consistency, but it's not too watery, so that I can create those little markings that I can see there on that side of the petal. And I'm going to leave it to dry completely. I don't want to soften those markings. I want to leave it like that for now, and I might go back later with a water glaze and soften it, but for now I want to leave it like that. Just want to drop in a little bit of a more red orange mixture there. And sometimes you just don't feel like painting in all of the detail. You just want to relax. You just want to sit there and you don't want to think about too many things. You just want to sit and relax and you want to just paint a quick rose. And this is exactly what it is. And again, just use the tip of my brush that I flattened between my fingers to soften those little lines. Again, the same mixture that I created earlier, just dropping it in on this section of the rose. It's quite dark, I can see quite a dark section there. Little sections where the sun shines through certain parts of the petals. I'm trying to create that as close to the reference photo as possible. And the green again is the Cupric green light with transparent yellow, and it creates this beautiful mixture. You can use sap green, and the most important part of painting is your tonal values, and you will notice that I go back with a much thicker consistency and I darken certain sections of my rose. For this painting I used art hot press watercolor paper, so I stretched it on a wooden panel. This is the rose that I finished.